The red bandanas was very pragmatic in that, like, you have these soldiers from World War I, and a lot of them end up being coal miners, and they're on the side of the miners when you get into the Battle of Blair Mountain. And then you have a whole other host of former World War I soldiers who end up joining the militia with the Logan Sheriff's Department. So I think the actual use of it is fairly pragmatic, but then you have like the events of the Hatfield McCoy feud that really, those are national events that end up feeding out to the public consciousness, and it sort of cements that stereotype of Appalachia. And then there's this media war around the mine wars also, where you have, much of the media making this case that the people from rural areas don't want the same things as somebody from like a more dense populated area like a city, and that the people here are different, and that somehow it's the innate quality of those people that are different, and that gets tied up into like that negative stereotype of redneck. So I think that there's some efforts to reclaim that word, and which is awesome. That's what we try to do here, and tell the true story of like the redneck bandana. But yeah, it's just so tied into that history of like the stereotype of the backwards Appalachian, and a lot of the things that like parts of our culture that we're proud of get tied in with parts that are less savory and that shouldn't be applied to all of us. But I'm local to Mingo County. I'm from Del Barton. It's the next town over. Something really interesting to me about the Mine Wars is how much regional and national interest, and sometimes even international interest there is, but not a ton of local, like you would think. It seems in many ways, and maybe it's just like generationally how far back we can think, but I grew up hearing a lot about the coal mines of like the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, but it really feels like a lot of what I heard about the Battle of Matewan, or what's known as the Matewan Massacre, was really sort of summed up in just a few lines of, oh yeah, well, the coal miners went on strike, and then they brought in the scabs, and there's a whole bunch of fighting and a whole bunch of killing, the end. And when you get that sort of reduced version of the story, you don't understand the context of what was going on. I'll be honest, as a kid, getting that really shortened version, it was hard to even put much meaning behind it or understand why it's significant or why it's even interesting. And I think that there's this incredibly interesting story that unfolds like right here in the coal fields that so many people locally still don't know a lot of the intricacies, or how their families may have even been involved, because they may have had family members closely involved.